While GameStop might have you think that older games are less valuable, certain titles are actually worth millions. Yeah, that's 7 figures. From Uncharted to Dying Light to Saints Row 4's infamous WadWad edition, rare or special editions of games can sell for a ridiculous amount of money today. Well, so long as you kept them in great condition at least. Collectors will pay an absurd amount of money for rare games, so you might be sitting on a fortune right now. That's why in this video, we're gonna break down some of the most valuable video games in the history of the medium. Let's go!
You want to tell me what's in there?
It's better if I show you.
Limited and special versions of games usually convince people to spend extra money on a game by offering some ancillary collectibles or items. We're talking about commemorative coins, a special figure, maybe an art book, and probably some kind of unique in-game item or weapon. Developer Deep Silver Volition took this idea to the next level, though, when they released the WadWad edition of Saints Row 4. This copy of the game was sold for $1 million, but it was the bizarre bells and whistles tied to the game that drove up the cost. This $1 million price tag would mostly go to things like a luxury hotel stay, a Lamborghini, plastic surgery of the buyer's choosing, and whatever a hostage rescue experience is. This special edition of Saints Row 4 was obviously a promotional stunt, but it was a really good promotional stunt. These rewards directly tie into the over-the-top tone of the game and attempt to bring elements of the gameplay into the real world. Even if most people could never afford this, it's still a fun gimmick. Do you like video games and want to get into acting? Do you like zombie movies and games? Do you have $10 million to spend? Well, if I just described you, then the Dying Light team had you covered in 2016, because they were literally selling a role in the Dying Light movie for $10 million. The Dying Light Spotlight Edition came with the guarantee that the buyer would have a supporting role in the Dying Light movie. The buyer would even get acting lessons, be a part of the screening tour, and get parkour and off-road driving training. However, it's safe to say that nobody bought this version of the game, but if they did, they probably got all their money back. There never was a Dying Light movie. In fact, more recent comments from the team behind the game suggest that there was never even a script. The rumor of a Dying Light movie was just a promotional effort that spiraled way out of control and never actually materialized. Now that video game movies are on the upswing, though, maybe we'll see a Dying Light movie someday. Just don't pay $10 million to be in it. If you thought the Dying Light folks had only one prohibitively expensive version of their game up their sleeve, think again. The Dying Light Apocalypse Edition had a price point of about $386,000 and a bunch of real-world rewards to make the number seem reasonable. This version of the game came with an actual zombie-proof cabin, getting your face in the game, 2 Razer headsets, night vision goggles, and adult diapers for some reason. No, yeah, it also included a set of parkour lessons. It's kind of baffling that there's more than one gimmicky super expensive version of Dying Light, right? After all, the zombie survival game was pretty well received when released in January of 2015, when zombie media was still all the rage. The game sold at least 7 million copies and, by all indications, was already going to be fairly successful. Then again, if a company thinks that they can make a quick 380 grand, they're definitely gonna try to. Fingers crossed the Dying Light team tries to pull just as many wacky stunts with the release of the sequel on the horizon. Nowadays, most racing games try to make extra money by filling their game with cosmetic microtransactions. Back in 2013, though, you could get something more tangible out of a copy of Grid 2 if you were willing to pay a lot more money. That's right, the Grid 2 Mono Edition came with a back mono roadster, as well as a copy of the game and a PlayStation 3. All of this would have been yours for the not at all low cost of $190,000. Promotional cars are actually pretty commonplace in video games these days, especially back in the mid-2000s and early 2010s. But you couldn't usually buy them, making this gimmick fairly unique for the time. Of course, chances are that if you can actually afford a sports car, you're probably not going to buy one that promotes a racing video game. In fact, this model of the Roadster only cost around $150,000 at the time of the game's release, so you're basically paying an extra 40 grand for a paint job and bragging rights. This bundle definitely wasn't the best investment. The Uncharted team tried their best to not put a price on the Fortune edition of Uncharted 2, but people found a way to, after the fact. This special edition of the game came with some collectibles, an art book, and a signed copy of the game in a collector's case. However, this version of the game was never put on sale and instead was only available to people who won giveaways. If you were lucky enough to get this rare copy of the game through a PlayStation blog event, you could sell it on eBay for about $3 grand. Yeah, people started reselling this rare title pretty quickly. Honestly though, who could blame blame them. Uncharted was super hot back in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Die-hard fans probably would have paid more than $3K to Naughty Dog directly for an ultra-rare version of the game, especially since it ties so well into the whole treasure hunter part of Uncharted. Thankfully, not selling a version of the game never really took off as a trend in the gaming industry. Resident Evil may be a hit series now, and was iconic when it first premiered, but there was no denying that Resident Evil 5 and 6 are weak points in the franchise. That's why Capcom did pretty much anything and everything they could do to raise interest in the series when Res 6 released. Case in point, they tried to sell a premium version of the game for $1,300 that came with a special jacket. No, not like a special sleeve for the game case. That would be ridiculous. This was a $1,300 leather jacket based on the one Leon Kennedy wore in the game. You know, because when you feel like buying a video game, you also want to get a ridiculously overpriced jacket. The promotion was only available in Japan, and to Capcom's credit, at least you got something usable out of the premium purchase. Back in the early 2010s, most collector versions of games just nabbed you a couple of trinkets. Still, even if this jacket is probably zombie-proof, it's not worth that much money.
Well, the world can have it, as long as someone ponies up the dough.
Did you pick up Dead Space Ultra Limited Edition back in the late 2000s? Well, if you did, you probably thought that $150 was pretty steep for a game, even if there were only 1,000 copies made. However, it turns out that that purchase was actually a really savvy investment. Well, as long as you didn't actually play the game and instead kept it in its packaging intact. If you did all of that, this special copy of Dead Space now sells for more than $1,000, making nearly 7 times your initial investment back after just 10 years. That's pretty good. Even if it means that you may have missed out on the beginning of what turned into a pretty influential video game series. Still, at least now you can buy a copy of every entry in the series and have money left over, or you could invest in some other games we've talked about. It turns out that games are actually a pretty decent way to diversify your portfolio. Or maybe play it a little safer with some CDs, like the certificates of deposit, not actual CD-ROMs. Those will not appreciate in value.
You'd think with 1,000 people on board, someone would pick up the phone.
Once Bethesda acquired the rights to the Fallout series, they leaned pretty hard into its unique retro future apocalyptic look. So much so that the parody present in the game was almost lost. This did result in a really cool version of Fallout 3 that came with a life-size model of Pip-Boy, though. It cost $120 back when the game dropped and was an Amazon exclusive. Yeah, Amazon did that kind of stuff before it had the economic power of a medium-sized country. If you bought that version of the game and kept it sealed, you should be able to sell it today for around $700. It's worth so much today because it hits the 3 sweet spots of being tied to a popular property, having a limited number of copies, and looking dope. Even if you can't actually wear the Pip-Boy model, it's still a must-have for any hardcore Fallout fanatic. Come on, Bethesda, start selling more wearable Pip-Boys again. That'll make you some money to hold you off until you finally release Elder Scrolls 6. Getting towards the genesis of special and limited edition versions of games, 2007's Bioshock released with a unique variant. Simply titled Bioshock Limited Edition, this version of the game came with a unique figure, a making of DVD and CD of the game's soundtrack. The packaging was also created by the winner of a fan contest. While it only cost $70 back then, it's now worth upwards of $650 if it's still in mint condition. This is a weird entry in this video for a couple of reasons. First, it's bizarre to think that the unique version of the game used to only cost 10 or so more dollars than the base version. Gaming has come a long way in the past decade, and one of the worst changes is that now everything is way more expensive. The other oddity is that nothing really sticks out about this edition to justify the value today. Seriously, go check the closet of your parents' attic. If this unassuming box is sitting around somewhere and still sealed, you probably just made a quick $600. On the other end of the spectrum, the Dark Souls 3 Prestige Edition cost around $500 at launch. Why was this version so much more expensive than similar special versions of the game, you may ask? Well, the Prestige Edition came with a 40-centimeter figure of the Lord of Cinder. That's it. That's why it was so expensive. If you know anyone who's into figure collecting, they can testify that the hobby can get pretty pricey pretty quickly. Still, though, a version of the game costing about $350 more than the next cheapest version because of a figure is pretty ridiculous. Then again, people bought it, and it's hard to get too mad at From Software considering their track record of making amazing games. So long as this money was well spent or went into making their upcoming games better, you can't really fault them for seeing an opportunity and taking it. From Software really came into their own with their Dark Souls series, and they've almost certainly got great things in store for the next one, if Dark Souls 4 ever comes out. Fingers crossed they don't overcharge all their special editions, though. Now, would you spend $1,000 on an official Resident Evil leather jacket? Let us know in the comment section down below. While you're there, be sure to like this video, subscribe for more, and ring that bell icon. The Gamer has more highlights from gaming history coming soon, and you're not going to want to miss them. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.